Welcome into the Grace Point Daily podcast. My name is Jeremiah Johnson. This is a verse-by-verse edition of the Bible. Thanks for all of you that join us each and every week, verse by verse. Dr. R.B. Maynard, we just go through the Word, get deep into it. So we're excited to do that. We are in 1 Kings chapter 16. Crack open your Bible, your mobile device, etc. Dive into it. And again, on the Grace Point Daily podcast, we exist to bring you daily encouragement for your daily walk with Christ. So thank you for all of you that join us. Make it a part of your routine, your weekly routine. Thank you very much. Dr. R.B. Maynard, welcome in. How are you, sir?
I'm good.
It's hot and humid here in southwest Missouri.
It is. It's about to kill me.
We're complaining about wetness, rain. Now it's dry and hot, so
never happy.
Anyway, and we get into the Word, but we like to take people behind the curtain just ever so slightly to get to know you. You're not just this famous, smart, theological person.
Right.
You are a real individual that lives real life like all of us.
What did they say? Myself.
Put your pants on one leg at a time. Mm-hmm. I do two at a time, but
Yeah, well, I do one at a time, but usually I stumble and fall a couple times before I get them on. So,
but all that to say is, I was noticing on Facebook, it was it the 3 years since meeting?
3 years
Stella?
Since meeting, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
That was the first date.
That was the first date. We went back to the same restaurant. We wore the same clothes. They've been washed since 3 years ago, but same clothes that we wore. So very romantic. Same restaurant.
Nice.
So, yeah.
That was the first date? Did you kiss on the first date?
No, I think she was afraid of me. So, and she should have been. But,
you didn't
I won her over really quick.
Fly to Vegas after the first date?
No. She was a little afraid. I think even after that date, she came down and we were going to go to Branson for the day or something. And I think she was a little worried that when I asked her to go to Branson, I think she thought I was asking her for the weekend.
Oh, okay.
Not just the day. And then she came to the house and I was showing her around the house. She was a little fearful because, she really didn't know me. She was in my house and it's like, she said, I notified my kids where I was going to be and what time. So, which, that's understandable.
Yeah.
She didn't really know me.
Sure.
So
being smart, being wise.
Yes,
I do the same thing when I go to your house. I tell my wife, listen, I'm going to Rick Maynard's.
Yes.
If anything happens.
Yep. You'll know where I was. You'll know where to find the body.
All right. Well, congratulations. You've been married 2+ years, right? 3
Going
years.
on 3.
Okay.
Going on 3. Yes. So.
Well, praise the Lord.
But we knew each other 8 weeks.
Yeah.
From the first date to marriage was about 8 weeks, from July 7th to September 17th. So
you're an old guy, so you don't mess around when you get in those latter stages of life.
You know what you want.
Get her done.
Yep, that's right. Hey, I don't know how long I got to live. If I'm going to get married, I better do it now. That's
right.
Yeah.
So
okay. Anyway.
Let's get into the Word.
Okay, here we go.
1 Kings chapter 16.
16, 8, 9, and 10. And again, we're always in the middle of all these different kings and how long they reigned and those kind of things. So it says, in the 26th year of Asa, king of Judah, Elah, son of Baasha, became king of Israel, and he reigned in Tirzah 2 years. Zimri, one of his officials, who had command of half his chariots, plotted against him. Elah was in Tirzah at the time, getting drunk in the home of Arza, the man in charge of the palace at Tirzah. Zimri came in, struck him down, and killed him in the 27th year of Asa, king of Judah. Then he succeeded him as king. So he hadn't even reigned 2 years. We've talked about that before. The counting time is like 1 full year, but it could be a few months of the previous year, a few months into the next year. So probably not even 2 full years. And so this is another one of those strange stories about the way things happen in the Bible, that this guy's a king, he's getting drunk, he's got this official that works for him, and the official that works for him decides he wants to be king, so he just kills the king and becomes the king. I can't help but think we must be missing something in some of these stories.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these things would be, again, when we say, when I get to heaven, I'm going to ask God this, or I'm going to ask God that. Well, I think, these kind of things, probably God would be happy to answer, about why things happened or why things were allowed. I don't think God's going to answer, why did you let my kid die? Or why did you let my mother get sick? Or, I don't know if God's going to sit around and answer those kind of questions all day. Mm-hmm. But I think biblical things, we might get like Paul Harvey says, the rest of the story on some of these things. But I just, I mean, the king, obviously he's not being very kingly by, hanging out and getting drunk. And we like to think drunkenness is a new thing. Alcohol is a new thing.
Yeah.
But, this is thousands of years ago. The king's laying around getting drunk, and the guy comes in and kills him. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just, it's an amazing thing that it's that easy. Today, if one of the officials killed Donald Trump, I mean, they wouldn't become king. They'd be in prison.
Right.
I mean, so
Yep.
just a different time. And don't ask me to explain why it was that way or why it was allowed. And then the interesting thing, I mean, this guy comes in and kills him, and we'll come back to this because it actually states it in a couple of verses later. But he kills him, but then he only gets to be king for 7 days. But this next scripture, which is an amazing thing, it says, as soon as he began to reign and was seated on the throne, he killed off Baasha's whole family. He did not spare a single male, whether relative or friend. So, I mean, it's the very first thing. I mean, his first order of business is
Yep.
to kill off every male from
Wow.
from the family. I mean, it's just, and some of them say, I mean, he only reigned 7 days, so there's some thought that he did it the exact day he became king. That was like, okay, I'm king now, put the crown on my head, go out and kill Baasha's family.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the order. I mean, you don't have time to sit around and plot and
Wow.
and it's amazing too, because these guys who apparently were his officials who worked for him had to be fearful enough of him that, I mean, he kills the king, he becomes king, first thing, go out and kill these guys. So what do? They go out and kill them. I mean, it's like their faithfulness probably not to him because they loved him, but because of probably just respect for the office of being king.
Yeah.
And so,
And we don't function in a culture that's like that. So
Right.
an example could be like North Korea, Kim Jong-un, or people like that, where
Right.
how does he stay alive? Or
Right.
in a system like that, would you, even him, the closest advisors, because he killed his brother, right? Or
Right.
something like that.
Right.
So, I mean, to exist in leadership and that,
Right.
you think, does he wake up and have to watch his back 24/7,
Oh, I
wake
know.
up in the middle of the night, see a dark shadow?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Well, we talked about it in Sunday school the other day, and with all the unrest there is now, and I'm not trying to be negative, but honestly, I am surprised that there hasn't been assassination attempts on the president. I mean, I know
Or a congressman or senator.
right, just
that
somebody
matter.
that's part of the Republican or Democrat. I mean,
Yeah.
there are
Yeah.
people who hate Democrats. There's people who hate Republicans. I mean, Nancy Pelosi's in the news, and how bad she is. Well, and I'm not, I'm not advocating that. I'm just really surprised with the culture that we live in today. Now, I can remember years ago when it was illegal to even make a threat to the president. I mean, if you spoke the words, "I'm going to kill the president," you'd be under arrest and investigated and everything else. And now you can walk down the street carrying
Yeah.
a sign, "Kill Trump" or whatever, and that's your right. To
I think
do
the only
that.
one it was 2 years ago was Kathy something. She's
Yeah.
a red hair. She
Kathy
had
Griffin.
Kathy Griffin had his head with like a knife and blood. And
I know.
I think they followed up with her on that, but even she didn't get in trouble for that.
I know. So, it's just amazing the difference. And one of the things scripturally, and I heard somebody talking about this here a while back about how the scripture, the way it's worded sometimes, if it were really in what we would call modern English or like the urban, there's an urban dictionary, what a word means in our culture that maybe it didn't mean in another culture, kind of thing. The Bible uses some terms sometimes to make emphasis that we might use something along the same lines or use something more graphic, but because we're in the church, there's certain, we don't want to offend anybody by that kind of language, so we change the language of the scriptures just to make it sound a little better. But the scriptures were pretty, let me just read, when it's talking about killing off all the males, the NIV says every single male. So in other words, no reproduction in that family is what they're looking at. The King James says one that pisseth against the wall. I mean, now that's a word, it's
King
like,
James. That's King
yeah,
James.
that's King James.
Oh, see, I need to read out
Yeah.
the King James more
There you
often
go.
than I can get away with. No.
And the Hebrew says one that urinates on the wall. In other words, a way to describe the males. In other words, it's making the point that this is a very derogatory thing to be killing these
Right.
males. And for emphasis, the language then is stronger. And so, we dance around, and I know, I'm a lot older than you are, been in the church my whole life. I can remember you would never say from the pulpit that somebody was pregnant.
Okay.
Pregnant was a sexual word, or what? I mean, it
Because you had to do that
right.
to get pregnant.
And so
Right.
you would not use the word pregnant. And and I'm not saying, I'm just telling you how it was. I'm not talking about what I think about things, but I can remember when if a young
So you're
lady.
referring to the other Sunday when I asked a lady if she was pregnant.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, yeah, I did.
Yeah, was she?
Raymond and Simone.
Oh,
remember, I was
okay.
like, "Are you pregnant?"
Oh yeah. Oh, I was about to leave the church over that, but
Yep.
but I came
I
back.
asked
I'm gonna
Stella
give you
that
another
one
chance.
time too, but she's
Yeah.
like, "We're done." you know?
We're gonna have grandkids instead of kids, but,
Right.
But the wording, and again, I can remember when if a young lady got pregnant and she wasn't married, you would not think about having a baby shower,
Yeah, yeah,
you
right.
know, because that would be condoning what they had done. There was no
Yep.
mercy, forgiveness, support. It was just like we don't do that because that makes it seem like it was all
Right.
okay. And so things have changed, and even the language of the Bible. I think you'd find a lot of places probably that it would be almost like when somebody said something, we've toned it down for the scripture, but it would probably be almost a cursing. It said they cursed God. I'm not sure what all language they used to curse God. We curse God today by
Yeah.
certain things. So
Yeah.
some of the Bible's pretty graphic if you really got down to what the meanings behind some of these things were. But and this is all males, not just relatives, but friends. In other words, you don't want anybody left who will support that family. That's the whole idea. No males, no generation to come that's going to look back and say, hey, your grandpa was a great king, or whatever. You're wiping out the whole thing. So 16, 12, 13, and 14. So Zimri destroyed the whole family of Baasha in accordance with the word of the Lord spoken against Baasha through the prophet Jehu, because of the sins Baasha and his son Elah had committed and had caused Israel to commit, so that they provoked the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger by their worthless idols. As for the other events of Elah's reign and all he did, are they not written in the annals of the kings of Israel? And this, I think we've talked about it before, but when it says in accordance with the word of the Lord spoken against Baasha through the prophet Jehu, it's not that God is going around saying, I don't like this guy, I'm going to kill him. In other words, it's God's will for these things to go bad. It's just saying, as God would say through the prophet, I'm not saying that I would like for it to happen like this. I'm just telling you this is what's going to happen. So when it says it's spoken by the word of the Lord, it doesn't mean God wanted things to go bad. He's just saying, I knew they were going to go bad. I mean, we have predictions now about what the end times are going to be like. That's not saying it's God's will for there to be lawlessness and all of those kind of things, but we could say by the word of the Lord, these things are going to happen.
It's my raging, not to digress too deeply here, but it's my raging debate. I've had multiple conversations this week. There's two popular prophetic words right now.
Right.
The one was Assemblies of God pastor in Kentucky, which I think there's validity to some of the dreams he's had, but his was a little more hopeless.
Right.
Some were saying, and another individual that probably in our area some people are connected with. His is more hopeful, so it's taking our stand with who we're going to side with or whatever.
Right.
But basically being the argument I have is like it feels like what I'm trying to connect here with the word is that we feel in America like God has to bless America,
Right.
that He has to, like even if we defiantly sinned,
Right.
we're so needed by God. That's where I get have a little beef with that.
Right.
All that saying, what I'm trying to connect with you is that God never and does not want to not bless or not prosper or bring goodness, but he is just and right. And it could be America, but if we're sinning, we have to deal with that. We reap what we sow.
Right. Well, and it's with all the things that are going on right now. One of my takes on all this about, and we're not going to get off on the tangent about wearing masks, not wearing masks, but all these things that these so-called experts, and I'm not saying that this doctor's not an expert, this doctor, but it's a little bit, I've related it to our Christianity sometimes, or not even that, but religion, to choosing your church or choosing your denomination. A lot of people don't research everything and then decide, well, this is, I get that, I believe that, so I'm going to be Baptist, I'm going to be Assemblies, I'm going to be Methodist, whatever take. It works the opposite for most people. We decide what we're going to believe, then we go find a church or denomination that agrees with what we believe. And so, or I believe this, and so we go find all the scriptures that will support that, and then that's where we draw our. So instead of saying, Lord, lead me, guide me, and teach me, it's more about, I already know, so now I just got to find a group of people that'll agree with me, and we'll make our own church or our own denomination. I think that's why you have churches on every street corner. Some guy decided that he didn't like this little part of Assemblies, Baptist, whatever it is, so he goes and starts a group, and he takes a group from that church who agree with him, and they then start their own little church. And so all of these things with God's will, because God allows things, sometimes we just think, well, that was his will. It was his will. And if it's just like now we think, well, it was God's will for Donald Trump to be in there, but then it wasn't God's will for Barack Obama to, it just depends on who you liked. Yep. The way people. So anyway, we better not get off too far in that. But that, according to the word of the Lord, is not about God's will. And I just wrote some of these other versions because it talks about provoking God, and it's one thing to I sin, I make mistakes, and I ask for forgiveness, and there is forgiveness, and there's mercy and grace, but there's a point in lives where we provoke someone to something. I'm amazed at the people who will stand and scream in the face of a police officer, wanting that police officer to hit them or something, so that they can videotape that, and that provoking, trying to provoke him to do something, and that is provoking God, is that blatantly, really in his face, saying, "Yes, that's a great example. I'm not gonna do this." And we get in God's face. I'm not gonna stop what I'm doing. I don't see anything wrong with it. I don't care what God said. I believe that it means something different. And so, provoking God is to get in God's face, really. And the King James says they provoked God by their vanities. The NIV says they provoked God by their worthless idols. The Hebrew says they provoked God by their nonsense. And I love that because, again, if you're trying to relate any of these things to today's society, don't you think God is provoked right now with the nonsense? Yes, there's science, and there's medical opinions, and there's all these things going on that are based on good research, and both sides, whichever side you choose to believe, you can find all the research that'll support that side of it that you want to find. But provoking God by nonsense is some of the rioting and the things that God is like. I have to think he's shaking his head like, what is, not that God doesn't know what's going on, but what are you doing? I think it's almost, I relate some of what happens today as what happens when Moses was on the mountain and he came back and they'd made a golden calf and they were dancing around and worshiping, and the nonsense that they were, that's what provoked God was, how stupid can you be?
Yep.
I mean, and then even Aaron, oh, well, we just threw a bunch of gold in the fire and out came these calves. You know, like even when caught red-handed,
Yeah.
still tried to be defensive, you know. It just popped out of the fire. God, I don't know what happened. So, and it always mentioned, and we won't go off on it again, but it always mentions that what provokes God is idol worship. That's what, every time you can talk about that when you're talking about these kings, it all has to do with idol worship. And in 15 it says, in the 27th year of Asa, king of Judah, Zimri reigned in Tirzah 7 days. So that's where we're talking about, he was only there 7 days. The army was encamped near Gibbethon, a Philistine town. And I almost thought about this in a comical way, because I thought, he's a king and he's going around and it's like, how long you been king? 7 days.
Yeah.
Like not much bragging rights, or how your dad was a king? Yeah. How long? 7 days.
7 days, yeah.
7 days, and then he was out. And I thought of, and some people, you won't remember this, but my Sunday school class, I always tell them there's such old geezers in there that they remember all the old TV shows and all the old stories, and you don't have to study very much when you teach my Sunday school class, because they're so old they forget by the next week. That's why it takes so long. I just keep repeating the same message over and over.
Yeah, that was a really good one.
Yeah. Well, now if anybody was listening, they'll quit. But there was a show on years ago called Queen for a Day. I don't know if you've ever heard of that show or not, but it was where it was a bunch of ladies in the studio audience, and I don't know all the rules, because there would have had to have been some kind of restrictions, like they couldn't come in and say, I want $1 million, or something outlandish. So there was probably a dollar restriction or something that would say, give me just a little bio and why you think you should be queen for the day. And they might say, I would like to have a new washing machine. I've had hard times and I've been sick and I've not been able to work and my washing machine broke down. I could really use. So what they would do then is whoever, the judges or whatever, would narrow that down to like 5 of the most compelling stories. And out of those 5, they would choose one who would win the prizes, and they would call it, that was queen.
Sounds like reality TV before reality TV.
Yeah, see, that's nothing new either. But so that one person then would be crowned queen for a day. So, and you can look all that up. If you get on there, it's legit. I'm not making that story up this morning. But 12, 13, 14. Or no, I'm sorry. I just did that, didn't I?
Yes, sir.
I'm getting behind here. I better move on. Losing my place. 16. When the Israelites in the camp heard that Zimri had plotted against the king and murdered him, they proclaimed Omri, the commander of the army, king over Israel that very day there in the camp. And there's some of the commentary that talks about that says that the only reason that they supported Omri was to defeat Zimri. And it's like a false support to get what you want. In other words, we think we can manipulate him or whatever, so let's get him in there as king. We don't really like him, but let's get him in there as king because he'll do what we want to do. And again, you can relate all these things. I said the book of Kings, you can pull all that stuff into today's political things, or even maybe 10 years ago political. You could probably still pull it into that because it was very political. But I've heard people say that the only reason they would vote for Trump is because they don't like Biden. They don't think Trump's any good.
Kanye West for president.
Kanye, there we go. Yep. There you go. But I don't know. We won't get off on that. But one of the things they said, well, Kanye really, they said, well, how can he run? Because I thought he was a friend of Trump's. But they said that he will pull votes from Biden, which means Biden will get less votes. Kanye won't win, so it'll be a push for Trump. Now, I don't know.
Hey,
that's just
Elon Musk is fully supporting Kanye. So if Elon Musk is fully supporting Kanye, I will fully support Kanye.
Yep. I mean, what more could? I mean, he knows. So, and he's got the money to do it.
Right,
So.
it's my guy.
But it's like almost a false support. You know, I can say I'm a Trump fan, but then I could turn around and say the only reason I voted for Trump is because I didn't want Hillary in. You know.
Yeah.
And so.
Okay, let me bring the illustration even closer to home. Probably my biggest pet peeve, which I've had in every position, specifically as lead pastor, prior to and even since I've been here, I've had people that to my face sat me down and said, Jeremiah, you have my full support. That are nowhere to be seen today.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So, yeah,
you want me to tell you who they are?
Yeah, you want to mute for a second. Yeah. Trust me, I probably know who they are. But anyway, it's a false support to get what they want is all they're after. But verse 17, then Omri and all the Israelites with him withdrew from Gibbethon and laid siege to Tirzah. 18, when Zimri saw that the city was taken, he went into the citadel of the royal palace and set the palace on fire around him, so he died. So it's a suicide, if you would. And again, I mean, we just can't imagine these things. I mean, can you imagine if, we have an election and it's Joe Biden or Donald Trump, and Joe Biden loses the election or Donald Trump loses the election, and he goes into not necessarily the White House because it wasn't the temple or whatever, it was a palace, but they go home and say, well, if I can't be president, I'm just going to burn down the palace and kill myself, and that's what, I mean, these guys, some of them were murdered by other kings, some of them were just overthrown and kicked out, some of them's families were killed, all these different things that have happened, and then now we have a record of a guy who, if I can't be king, I'd rather just die, and he burns his own palace down with himself inside, as a suicide.
Wow.
And so, and we can again, we won't get off on that, but you can get off on that whole thing. Well, if somebody commits suicide, do they go to heaven? Do they go to hell? And all these kinds of things, and so that would be a whole other discussion. That might be something for modern Christian dads or something. Yeah. That's a different discussion. But 19, because of the sins he had committed, doing evil in the eyes of the Lord, and walking in the ways of Jeroboam, and in sin he had committed and had caused Israel to commit, and all it's saying there, why did he die? He died because of his sin. He died, and we can look at these people and say, oh, he was a bad guy and God killed him. We all die because of sin. I mean, yeah. but some of us die because of sin because of Adam and Eve, the original sin or whatever. Yes, we're all going to die, but there are people, I think, who die prematurely because of their sin, because of the things they've chosen to do, and basically have taken their life. And this is, it says he died, but it says, he didn't die because of the sins of the past 7 days. I mean, he's only been king for 7 days. He died because of some kind of a lifestyle. And if you look at that, probably a lot of people didn't even know he was king. I mean, and again, in today's culture with YouTube, CNN, Fox News, I mean, there'd be a major announcement. This guy killed the king and now he's king. And then 7 days later, they'd say, well, he was king for 7 days, but this other guy came along, and we get that news minute by minute, what happened. But back then, I mean, I don't know how fast you could get the news around the nation, but probably not very fast. So I'd say there was people like, what? He died. I didn't even know he was king.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
And so it doesn't have to do with just those 7 days, but it says he did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He walked in the ways of Jeroboam, and we've mentioned this many times, how terrible it must be to have your name smeared through the book of Kings as Jeroboam was, because every time it refers to how bad somebody was, you're worse than Jeroboam. You're worse than Jeroboam. I've used that example of children. You're the worst Maynard I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Or if my dad had been such a terrible man, that somebody would say to you, Pastor Jeremiah, you're worse than Raymond Maynard. My dad's name was Raymond. You're worse than Raymond Maynard. And then somebody else came along. You're as bad as Raymond Maynard. Yeah. I mean, how would you like to have your name smeared to that point of people saying, you're as bad as that guy that everybody knew was bad? You know, it's one thing for somebody to have an opinion that you're, I don't like you or whatever, but it's like, how bad am I? Well, you're worse than Charles Manson. I mean, you know, anytime anybody has any history at all, you know, Charles Manson and the kind of man he was. Well, how'd you like for people to be, you're so bad, you're worse than Charles Manson? I mean, that's kind of the spirit of this. But walking in the ways of Jeroboam, the sins he had committed, it goes back to those same things we've talked about. He caused Israel to sin and idol worship. And so it just begins to, with each one of these guys, they almost all have the same progression of sin that leads to their downfall. And it's just a lesson for us to learn today, or a lesson we should learn, that when we look at history and things that have happened either in our family, whether it's, you know, I had an alcoholic father and I don't want to be an alcoholic, but we don't use those examples sometimes to say, man, I don't want to be like Jeroboam. I don't want to be like, but these guys just kept, you know, it's what is it? Insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. These guys were doing the same thing over and over, but thought they were going to be a better king. But they just kept repeating, walking the ways of Jeroboam, doing evil in the eyes of the Lord, the sins he had committed, the sins he caused Israel to commit, and idol worship. It just followed every one of these kings as they went through. So we better wrap it up there today. So.
Awesome. Well, thanks for listening to the Grace Point Daily Podcast, verse by verse with Dr. R.B. Maynard. Want to always remind you as well, you can catch all the audio on any platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, those kind of things. And also, don't forget that you can watch Facebook Live. Go to the Grace Point Assembly of God Facebook page. You can check out all of our live videos. You can interact with us that way. That way, if you're watching live, you can give a comment and reaction. Notice in the duration of our podcast today, your rival, Ella Mae Smith, even hopped on there for a little bit.
She's probably just waiting for me to make a mistake and put another feather in her cap.
She is a little bit more consistent than you are.
She is more consistent.
Dr. R.B. Maynard, I will say that.
But she only came once a week, and I was here 3 times, so I probably know.
All right. We'll get into the Word. We need the Word more than ever before. Thanks for joining us on the Grace Point Daily Podcast. We will talk to you guys next time.